Welcome back to episode 2, season 3 of the greatest of all time, the last 16 teams. We're going alphabetically through the city. We're going to Kansas City through the Washington Commanders. Ryan, you excited for this?
I am. I'm thrilled.
We're going to start off with the team I hate the most. Bruce is back with us here on episode 2. We had a great season 1. I need a nap.
You do.
Episode 1 for season 3 with Bruce, and we're going to bring him back as much as we possibly can for the viewers of you, all 12 of you, which would be great. All right, we're moving on.
I am intrigued to see your answer to this question, Ben.
The greatest of all time.
For the
Kansas
Chiefs.
City Chiefs.
Here we go, the Kansas City Chiefs. Ugh.
Go ahead and say it.
Jamal Charles.
You can't say it, can you?
Tony Gonzalez. I don't think there's any other question. We should move on.
All right, I'll do it to you. I'll do it to you.
Don't do it. Don't do it, Bruce. You're a Bills fan.
I am a Bills fan, but Patrick Mahomes, I mean, you gotta. I mean, he's the youngest player to ever win a league MVP and a Super Bowl title.
There you go.
You can't deny it. And he's got how many Super Bowl rings?
3.
Just as many as he has, refs' Christmas cards.
It's tough, but I mean, the truth of the matter is, well, you want to be the best, you got to beat the best, and you got to argue that Patrick Mahomes, he's not only the best player in the history of the Kansas City Chiefs, he might be the best quarterback, the best player in the NFL today. He might be.
No. I think Lamar Jackson, talent-wise, is better than him. I think the reason he is in that conversation that you were talking about here,
Yes, sir.
is only because of Andy Reid.
Maybe. And I think one of the things that people, and we're doing the same thing here, we want to talk individuals, when in reality, this is a team sport. This is a sport that, somebody finding the right fit, say what you will, but that drafting of Patrick Mahomes to the Kansas City Chiefs, the fit with Andy Reid, it's worked and worked well.
Look, and I'm going to tell you that I personally, and this is no joke, I think Travis Kelce is better than Patrick Mahomes as the greatest Chief of all time. Now, don't get me wrong. Patrick Mahomes can throw the ball. He can get out of trouble. He could be that quarterback that you need to win Super Bowls. But without the knowledge that Travis Kelce brings for Mahomes, like, look at the 13-second game against the Bills. It breaks my heart every time I talk about this.
You're gonna shed a
But he
tear.
literally walked up to Mahomes and said, the middle of the field is going to be open, and I will be there. Before they even had the play set up, lined up, and everything, Travis Kelce understands the game. And I think that gave Mahomes the big advantage of being considered the greatest of all time. And when you talk about like greatest quarterback of all time, you got to throw Tom Brady Tom Brady right now is obviously the greatest of all time in the NFL, but Tom Brady brought the knowledge to his team. You can say Gronk did, but no, Gronk doesn't even know how to spell Gronk. Like
Maybe.
Tom Brady brought
Wow.
the knowledge and the skill to that team. I think Patrick Mahomes only brings the talent and not the knowledge. And that's why without Travis Kelce, they'd have one, maybe no rings.
Well, I agree with Bruce. It is Patrick Mahomes.
Nope.
I'm going to throw another name at you.
Jamal Charles.
Derek Thomas.
Derek Thomas.
What about Tony Gonzalez?
I have that on there too, but he
What-
already said Tony. So
What is Derek Thomas? He holds the record for most sacks in a game, Derek
Correct.
Thomas, right? Was
Yes.
it 7?
No, I want to say it was like 7, 8, something like that. Yeah,
it was
a
against
lot.
Seattle.
It
It was
was a
against
lot.
Seattle, right? He was chasing
Russell
Dave
Wilson?
Craig around.
Dave Craig, yeah. It was
Said
what,
Russell
90,
Wilson.
93, 92, something like that?
Right, but we talked Tony Gonzalez. I mean, he's an interesting player for sure. And when you would talk greatest tight end of all time, maybe he's one of those.
He's top 3 for sure.
Oh, for sure.
That's pushing it, man. There's a lot of tight ends that could be above him because then you got to bring in the titles. You got Travis Kelce, who has more rings, who played on the team and has more success than Tony Gonzalez. You got Gronk, who's won 7 Super Bowl rings with Tom Brady. I mean,
Gronk didn't win all of them with Tom Brady. He only won like 3.
4 at least.
Because
He followed him to Tampa and won with Tampa too.
yeah, but he wasn't there for the early 2000s when Brady won those.
Okay.
And by the way, Derek Thomas, it was 7 sacks against the Seahawks, November 11th, 1990.
1990. Okay.
7 sacks in a game.
Wow.
It's impressive.
Wait till I take the field. I could beat that.
So, you think the Chiefs are going to repeat as AFC champions?
No, not in a million years. They have cap problems right now. And I mean, you can't. It's just like Andy Reid. You can't count him out. Just like Tomlin. He's gonna find a way to win with the talent that he has.
I think a lot of veteran players that want to be chasing rings are gonna end up in Kansas City.
And maybe that's right. Maybe your wide receiving cores that are free agents. You got Diggs, Keenan Allen,
Devontae Adams.
Devontae Adams. They might take a pay cut just to win a ring, because none of those guys have one.
Right.
So let's not talk about this ugly team. Taylor Swift could be considered the greatest Chief of all time.
I was waiting for it.
The greatest Raider.
The greatest Raider.
My greatest Raider, I wanted the Bills to pick up at free agency, but he just signed. Max Crosby.
$106.5 million,
Yep.
3 years.
Yep.
A lot of money.
He's 26. He's in his prime. I really wish the Bills would have picked him and gave him money before we considered Myles Garrett, just because of the age and because that dude is a hoss.
He is. Max Crosby's a hell of a player.
He kind of reminds me of like a Mac Hollins too, just crazy, absolutely crazy, and will fit that snow
Yeah.
mentality with the shirt off, kind of like Jason Kelsey when he went to the Buffalo Bills to watch his brother play. Just takes off his shirt, jumps out of the box, and was like, "Oh my gosh, it's cold."
So you have Max Crosby as your greatest Raider?
I do. I don't know a lot about the Raiders.
I had 2 names down on mine. I probably could have had more, but I have Marcus Allen and or Tim Brown.
And this is where Bruce gives us a list of people that I've never heard of.
Well, if I'm talking Raiders and I'm thinking of you, I mean, Tim Brown, you got to give him, some credit. Marcus Allen for sure. What about Howie Long?
Howie Long, yeah, he's
Howie Long. I mean, there's a classic guy.
the greatest what if is Bo Jackson.
Oh, I forgot about Bo Jackson.
Fred Biletnikoff,
I'd
wide
never heard of
receiver.
him.
Yeah.
Hunter Renfro.
I'm sorry, but no.
No. I mean, Jerry Rice played for Raiders, but I wouldn't say he had his greatest years with the
No,
Raiders.
he's the greatest of all time in a different team. But yeah, all right, let's move on from the Raiders. They need a lot of help in the offseason.
One more note for you on the Raiders.
Sure.
So I have a famous relative who played for the Raiders.
Oh yeah.
Yes, he was a fullback for the Raiders. Have you guys ever heard of a fullback by the name of Marv Hubbard?
Can't
In
say I have.
relation to Chubba Hubbard.
No.
Oh, okay.
No relation. But Marv Hubbard played for the Oakland Raiders. He played for them in late 60s, 70s.
Okay.
Was a Pro Bowl player, 3-time Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl 11 actually. Marv has a few fascinating stats around him, okay? So let me find an interesting one for you. Marv Hubbard averaged 4.82 yards a carry for his career. That is still in the NFL 13th best all time. 13th best all time. His yards per carry average, better than Walter Payton, better than O.J. Simpson, better than Eric Dickerson, Emmitt Smith, Marshall Faulk.
Wow, those are some big names.
Not too
Yeah.
shabby, right? It's my mom's cousin. So he's passed away now.
I was gonna say, do you have his number? Let's get him on the show.
Passed away. I'm sorry, but he when you would meet that guy and shake his hand, it was like shaking hands with a bear.
Really? You've
Absolutely.
shaken hands with a bear before?
Let me tell you. Yeah.
That'd be scary.
So, in fact, one of the great things is, of course, Marv played with those classic Raiders teams, his coach being John Madden.
Okay.
John Madden. A quote from John Madden about Marv Hubbard. Marv Hubbard was one of the toughest players we ever had. There are people that will have contact and people that won't have contact, but only a few that will have it and really enjoy it. Marv was one of those guys who truly enjoyed the collision. He would look for it. Now, when John Madden says you're a tough guy, that's impressive.
Yeah.
That's respect.
Yeah, it is.
That's pretty cool, though, that you have the relation to the toughest man in the NFL. All right.
Next.
The Chargers.
Chargers.
You know,
I have one name. I probably could have more, but I have one name.
did this come from ESPN or did it come from your head?
I mean, it's obvious.
LaDainian Tomlinson.
It's obvious.
Okay.
You're going Tomlinson?
Yeah.
Junior Seau?
Could be,
He
yeah.
was on the ESPN list.
I
when
mean, you
was
could go
doing-
Antonio Gates, too.
For sure.
You could go Dan Fouts,
Phillip Rivers?
but I still think it's
without
LT.
a Super Bowl. Without a Super Bowl, nope.
I mean, Kellen Winslow Sr.
I think Phillip Rivers has the potential to be the best Colt of all time, but I don't know.
Are you high?
Yes. I mean,
I mean, it's LT to me.
Yeah.
I mean,
I can go with that.
Yep. Okay. They need some help too coming up.
They
They have
need
potential.
they need some
have
receiver
potential.
help.
They need somebody that can catch the ball for sure. They don't need a star wide receiver.
They need a reunion with Keenan Allen.
They just lost
Maybe.
Bosa.
I don't dislike that. Yeah, they're losing Bosa.
They cut Bosa, yeah.
And what about their switch? They made a coaching change last year.
Yeah,
You
Jim
feel
Harbaugh.
Yeah, you feel good about that?
I do.
I do
do.
as well.
They
Yeah,
surprised me. I thought they were going to have a really down year. They really surprised me how good a year they
Again,
had.
a lot of that has to do with your coaching too. You know your players, you know how to use them, and I think again that's where Buffalo struggles is they don't know how to use the talent that they have because we have great talent. The year that we should have won and should have blown everybody out of the water, we lost in 13 seconds. But
Well, with the Chargers, where are you at on Herbert?
I have not the greatest Charger of all time yet. I think if he can get to the playoffs and win a playoff game, he'd start being in the conversation. But he's made the playoffs and hasn't won a game. So
Well, for sure, he's not the greatest of all time. But my point is with the Chargers for this next year, do you like him at quarterback?
oh yeah, you can stick with him. There's not a lot of talent. I mean, he's probably a top 10. If he's not in the top 10, he's right outside the top
Do
10.
you think the Chargers are going to have a better record than the Chiefs?
They have potential to have better record than the Chiefs if they have a good offseason.
Not yet.
Only because of the cap that they have. They have a lot of money they can spend. The Chiefs don't. The Chiefs could be on their downswing.
And you don't think the Chiefs are going to win a division next year?
I didn't say that. I said you asked if they had a chance to
You
win
said
the
it
division.
earlier in the previous episode.
I did. I don't think the Chiefs are going to have an easy road like they did. I think the Broncos are going to give them a ride for their money. The Broncos technically beat them twice, but so happened the ref gave them a right call, and
Here we go.
Broncos didn't win both those games. I mean, look it up. Watch the games. You'll see it. I mean, everybody saw it with the Chiefs
Always
this year.
the refs.
Most of the times it was the refs with the Chiefs. I mean, you could try to prove me wrong. What's the evidence that it's not the refs?
Did they actually win the game on their own?
Every call that the Chiefs get is on third down and long or third down and when the Chiefs aren't going to ever make it. When the Chiefs have to turn the ball over, they get the favor of the call. And it's just disgusting. It's awful. But anyway, that's not who we're talking about, okay?
We're
Ryan,
not.
you can rile me up with the Chiefs all you want. But we're talking about the Chargers. And you know what? I'd donate players if they played the Chiefs. From the Buffalo Bills, if I was the GM, I'd be like, hey,
Alone?
You can borrow Josh Allen for this game. And you can borrow Shakir. And you can borrow all of our defense. Like, we will take an L that week just so that we can beat the Chiefs. I say we because it's the NFL versus the Chiefs.
What's the next team then?
All right, we got the Rams.
The Rams.
The Rams. Marshall Faulk is the name that always comes to mind when I think of the Rams.
He's great.
Yeah,
no doubt.
I have Dickerson.
Dickerson, I
Or
mean,
Aaron Donald. I have Aaron Donald, them 1A.
Dickerson's 2,100 yards rushing, most all time. Still impressive, obviously. Deacon Jones,
Yep.
Okay.
old school, maybe.
You can go Torrey Holt, Isaac Bruce, too. They're great receivers.
Okay, just crazy because it wasn't long. How about Kurt Warner?
Kurt Warner.
I mean, say what you will, but
I
I mean,
about that
greatest
too.
show on turf. And
Yeah.
say what you will, remember the story that was. Remember that guy? He was bagging groceries because remember, Kurt Warner was not the year he won his first MVP.
He wasn't the starting quarterback.
He wasn't a starting quarterback in camp. Who was?
Mark Bolger.
No,
Not Mark Bolger.
Trent Green.
Trent Green, there you
Trent
go.
Green got hurt. Remember the coach crying that his quarterback went down. We're still gonna be competitive. And out of nowhere comes Kurt Warner. There was a story that Kurt Warner was working at a grocery store bagging groceries.
That's kind of like Tom Brady. Bledsoe got hurt, and they're like, dang it. And then got smoked by the Bills guy and knocked some sense into him, and there's Tom Brady, best ever.
Done.
It's
done.
disgusting.
So-
you know, I just kind of go back to the Raiders. We missed one person to talk about,
Who's
and that
that?
was Marshawn Lynch.
Marshawn.
He had a great Raiders career, but he is on my list of greatest of all time in a different team.
Oh.
So, all right, let's move on from the Rams to the ugly Dolphins. I think they need to start rebuilding this year. They spent
Yeah,
a lot of money.
you're not a big Tua fan, are you?
I don't think he's good. I really have not. He hasn't proved me right yet.
Well, he's another guy that's got an injury issue, and at the
Yeah.
very least, if you're the Dolphins,
gotta
you
get-
have to have a plan for this. You have to expect almost that he's going to miss 2, 3, 4 games, and those games he misses the last few years have been a disaster for the
100%.
Dolphins.
You got to get a backup quarterback.
You
How
have
is
to,
that not
but you
number
can't-
one on the priority list?
When you have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, you got literally
Yep.
cap in your starters, and that's it. You have nothing else. You are all in with the people you have, hoping they don't get hurt. When they do, it shows.
When Tua, was it 2 years ago that Tua was an MVP candidate? That when he's on the field, or was it 3 years ago?
ESPN talked about him being an MVP candidate a lot.
He put up big stats.
I think his rookie season.
And he got concussed.
But the reality of it is I don't know if you can depend on him. My problem.
One more big hit, and I think his career's over.
His career should have been over already, but he decided to come back. The doctors told him to not play football ever again. He's like, no, I'm playing. And he gets back up there and he goes in. Like, he's one shot away from not knowing who or what. He'd probably become a Dolphin.
It's such a funny thing because, to be honest with you, I'm not a fan of the Dolphins, but I certainly don't want to see the guy destroy his life. I don't want to see anybody get hurt.
No, you don't hope that on anybody. But when he's playing like that and he does end up getting hurt and destroying his life like that, you're like, how do you feel sorry for that? You've been warned.
Well, it's not just that, but in some ways, it's not fair to the rest of the players on the Dolphins team. I mean, they've got a very talented team. I think
That's
you
true.
can make an argument they're the most talented roster in the league. You can make that argument. Them, Baltimore, Philadelphia, there's a few of these teams that have a ton of talent.
Yep.
And when they don't ultimately win the big prize at the end of the season, and let's face it, the Dolphins weren't even close this year.
No.
Baltimore was in the playoffs, and you can argue, okay, they ran into somebody that was a little bit better on that day. Okay, fine. Mm-hmm. But the Dolphins, that's not the case. They were never a threat to win the championship. So you're a top 3-4 team in talent, and you're nowhere close to being a contender. That's a problem.
Yeah.
It was so ugly.
Oh.
Those 4 games he missed? It was bad.
Oh, my goodness.
It's funny. I mean, to me, it's just hilarious. It goes to show you. I mean, that means Tua is decent enough to be a starter, but, man, when they're not winning games with Tua on the field, it just goes to show you that the whole organization, it's either a coaching problem or you just got to move on from Tua. Like, there's potential elsewhere.
I mean, you got to have a plan in
when
case
Tyreek Hill wants out on the most talented team in the NFL, it's like.
Well, one of the things I would think about doing if I was the Dolphins, I'm not a Dolphins fan, but I think about the model that the 49ers showed us a few years ago with Brock Purdy, young at quarterback, but you surrounded him with a mountain of talent. Mm-hmm. And what you ended up with this offense in which get the ball out of the hands of the quarterback into your playmakers' hands and let those guys make plays.
Yep.
Could you run something like that in Miami where all of a sudden you part ways with Tua, you draft a quarterback, let's say, and the advantage of drafting quarterback is your dollars are way smaller. There's no argument on that.
Right. Yep.
And then you got Tyreek. You've got lots of talent. You've got a track team there.
You can use Achane as a Christian McCaffrey example.
Absolutely.
Now,
and
the
maybe,
only downfall with that I have with your logic there is their offensive line is booty, and they're playing in a division that's all about defense. The Bills are defensive focused. The Patriots are defensive focused. The Jets are probably top 5 defensive team in the NFL.
And let me pile on with you for a second. If you're going to be this track team offense, you're going to play at least 3 road games in New York, in New England, in Buffalo, all outdoors, all northern stadiums.
Correct. It's hard to be able to. I honestly think the Dolphins obviously don't belong in that division, and they need to readjust that because that is a disadvantage for Miami, big time. But at the same time, I don't know. It's hard to say how the Dolphins can change what they have.
And as bad as they are, they're still the second best team in that division.
But they shouldn't be. The Jets botched Aaron Rodgers.
For sure.
And, I mean, the Patriots on a rebuild season, but the Dolphins always seem to beat the Patriots whether they're good or not.
And I think the Patriots are up and coming.
Yeah. And they're not bad. They could potentially beat the Dolphins. The Dolphins could be ranked 4th this year. And I think last year you even predicted the Bills being 3rd or 4th in the league.
I predicted them
Wrong.
to be second.
100% wrong.
I predicted them to be second.
No, you did not.
Because I had the Jets win a division. The Jets let me down.
You had the Jets, you had the Jets, Dolphins, and then you had the Bills. At least.
Sure about this?
I really think we should focus on the important things here. That you were wrong.
100%. 100%. You were wrong.
But I got to go back to what you weren't wrong about. The Dolphins, clearly they're married to Tua right now. Clearly they have themselves a big contract that they're working with, but they've got to find a backup.
But
they
losing
have
Tyreek Hill. But wait, Bruce, before we go on, what did you say, Ryan?
Said, you're right. I had him 3rd.
One more time for the fans.
Really? You heard what I said.
All right. Another shocking team we're going to move to is the Minnesota Vikings. Who would have thought that Sam Darnold would have brought that team?
Wait a minute. We didn't talk all-time great with the Dolphins, did we?
Oh, I thought it was hands down Dan Marino.
That's right. I have Marino.
I mean, Marino for sure.
Ronnie Brown could be on the list.
Bob Greasy.
Zach Thomas.
We could talk about great players, but can anybody beat Dan Marino?
No.
That's why I was moving on. Just for time's sake, we got 16 teams and a low battery on my laptop. We got the Minnesota Vikings as the next team we're going to talk about.
Minnesota.
Sam Darnold making that team look like an all-star team until the playoffs.
You got to go Randy Moss, don't you?
Yes, but right behind him, give it some more time, Justin Jefferson. Maybe not there yet, but he can be.
I think Chris Carter's there too.
For sure.
Yep. I mean, Diggs, you can't leave out Diggs in the conversation too.
Randall McDaniel.
You can't leave out Adam Thielen. He had a really good Vikings career.
Okay, so let me ask the question. How do you have so many great wide receivers, but we're not naming a great quarterback?
Because their franchise does not go along with a quarterback.
They get the washed up quarterbacks. Like they had Brett Favre at the end of his career. They had Randall Cunningham at the end of his career. They had, wasn't Warren Moon there at the end of his career too?
They had Dante Culpepper. They had Culpepper. People that can get the ball to your stars, like, in San Francisco. You know who's trying to play that game, like the Minnesota Vikings? Your Indianapolis Colts. But they just can't get the help around that quarterback.
Sure. Okay, so if we want to talk greatest of all time, though, Fran Tarkenton, maybe?
Yeah.
Hall of Fame quarterback?
Yeah,
I
agree
still
with
think
that.
Randy Moss is that leader.
Well, I'll tell you another one that, I mean, we just got to give him some respect and mention him, is I always loved the defensive tackle John Randall.
Yeah.
John Randall played for the Vikings. 12 rounds of the draft back then, undrafted Hall of Fame player. 12 times every team in the league passed on that guy, and he's a Hall of Fame defensive tackle.
That's awesome. I mean, what about Dalvin Cook? You can throw him in there.
I mean, if you want to talk about strictly Vikings career, you got to go Harrison Smith, safety.
There's a lot of people that were successful in Minnesota. Don't get me wrong, but it's hard. I don't know. Still giving it to Randy Moss, but that's I don't know. It's hard not to.
Yeah.
All right, going to the New England Patriots. I think this one's easy, and nobody wants to talk about it as a Colts fan or a Bills fan. So Tom Brady, and that's about all I want to say about the New England Patriots.
We don't need to discuss them.
The terror for the last 30 years. It's just they shouldn't be talked about for the next 30.
As painful as it was for me to watch them, the part that I think was most impressive was the longevity. Yeah. The fact that they were so good for so long.
Years.
And it's just such a thing. And I tell you, one of the things I think was so impressive about them is multiple times they would part with a player that would be suspected for making the trade, but they didn't bury themselves in a salary cap. They didn't overpay. They didn't hold on to players too long. They had a core, which was clearly Brady and a few others. But the reality of it is I mean, you got to respect the success they had.
Yep, and everybody that wanted to leave thinking they were the greatest of all time because they played with Tom Brady, Wes Welker, all these guys that left for a contract never saw 500-plus yards after. Tom Brady made them good, period. I hate to say it. Dang it. All right.
Next team.
We got the Saints.
The Aints.
The Drew Brees, I think, greatest of all time, hard to beat.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Drew Brees. And you know, it's a fascinating thing to look back on, too. Do you remember Drew Brees going to the Saints? Because he played before the Saints. He played with
the Chargers.
With the Chargers.
Oh.
And Purdue before that.
He almost went to Miami.
Yes. And at the time, Miami signed who? Same year they signed
Culpepper.
Why?
Because Brees was hurt.
And
Brees was
they were
also
both
short.
They were both coming off an injury.
Yeah.
But Brees was coming off that shoulder injury. Mm-hmm. And everyone was concerned about that. The Saints, of course, liked him. He felt like it was a great fit. And, oh, my goodness, right? There it is in history. And look at all the yards and everything they've done.
Yeah, Sean Payton and Brees came to New Orleans the same year.
Oh, that fit was great.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
we've talked about it a few times here. That
would Brees would have fit somewhere else. And, I mean, Sean Payton's a coach.
Sure.
Like, look what he's doing in Denver right now.
Sure.
But, like, if Drew Brees didn't have Sean Payton, would he be considered even good?
I mean, he was okay in San Diego.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, he was good in San Diego.
Yeah, it's just hard to pick like that. It's like, okay, because you're fit in a good system, I mean, that's why he's the greatest of all time in the Saints. But in reality, if he didn't have Sean Payton, who would be runner-up for the greatest of all time?
Yeah, but I would argue the other way around, too, right? I mean, was Sean Payton considered a great coach? If he didn't have Drew Brees, would he be in that talk?
Now, when you have defensive players that are in the conversation of the greatest of all time, that's greatest, of all your team. Like, look at Lattimore for the Saints. That's not a guy you coach. You can't teach a guy defense. Defensive players basically teach themselves and cover themselves because every play is going to be different. Every situation is different. You can try to train them as best you can to find that situation, but with an offense, you listen to your coach and you do good, you're going to be great. If you execute what the plan is, then it works, you're going to be great. Defense, you execute the plan, and you're supposed to play cover one. Somebody blows by the other guy and you catch it and you go after that guy that they're going to throw the ball to and you end up intercepting it, You blew your own coverage. You didn't do what the coach told you to do, but because you had awareness, you were better.
I think some of the coaching on the defensive side, though, they've got a great system. They coach these players to play that system well,
Yep.
and some of these guys can perform. I think Pittsburgh at linebacker is a primary example of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
That they coach players to play well in that system, and it's a combination of they do find players that fit it, but I got to give some credit to some of these defensive coaches and the system they run.
Yep.
The key in the NFL on offense and defense is this is the greatest team sport in the world.
No, 100%.
And any
Yes,
one
agreed.
piece, like of your 11 men on defense, you got a weakness out there. NFL quarterbacks are awesome. Which one? All of them. They will find that. You got a corner that needs help, you're doomed because everyone's got to do their job. You can't cover for one of those guys.
Correct.
Right.
And that speaks to not just the players, but honestly, I think you're selling some of those coaches short for the job they do of putting that system together, putting them all in
Yeah, it's
position
not
to
just
succeed.
For defense, yes, you're right. But I'm talking like great players. I'm not talking just like players that do their job. I'm talking about great players. The reason they're great is because they have that situational awareness that you can't teach.
Maybe, but I still look at, we were talking about John Randall a minute ago. 12 teams passed on him. He was undrafted, Hall of Fame defensive tackle. Now, somewhere in there, I don't know if somebody helped him coaching-wise. I don't know what happened, but let's face it. 12 teams weren't impressed enough to draft him at the time. There's only 7 rounds now. So what happened? How did he move from that player that wasn't considered great in college to, oh my goodness, Hall of Famer in the NFL?
Right.
Somewhere along the way, I got to believe a coach deserves some credit.
That and determination of the player.
For sure, for sure.
If
You got
wanna
motivated.
Be great and you don't. they
That's
tell you
motivation right
Look
there.
at Josh Allen. Josh Allen, the same college career. He never got a chance. He had to go to Wyoming.
Sure.
That was his chance, and now he's
Yep.
considered probably one of the greatest quarterbacks in the
So
NFL right now.
we all agree it's Drew Brees, though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right. Moving on to the New York Giants. If you don't put Eli Manning on this list, then just an L.
I probably have to go with one of the greatest defensive players of all time, and that's Lawrence Taylor.
Yep, he was on my list. But the other one that's on my list that people do forget about because he's on Good Morning America, Mike Strahan.
For sure. You can't argue with those guys. Eli Manning, I always thought Eli Manning was a good quarterback.
Yeah.
I think he was in a good situation.
He got his rings. He got the team he wanted to play for.
Well, the other thing that's really impressive that a lot of people overlook on Eli is he got his rings by beating who?
Tom
Brady.
freaking Brady.
So-
Something that what the Indianapolis Colts could not do. Am I Ryan?
They did once.
I mean, say what you will, but I mean Brady was really tough to beat. He was in his
was.
prime, very good team, well coached, all that stuff, and to pull off the win in the biggest game on the biggest stage twice.
They beat the undefeated Patriots.
Right. I mean, add
It
that
was
whole
the
thing
perfect
up.
Season.
Yes.
Well, you had the great catch.
Yeah.
The helmet
The
catch.
helmet
The
catch.
helmet
David
catch.
Tyree.
Yes.
But that was thrown by the greatest of all time, Eli Manning.
I don't know if that's true or not, but you
And
got to
then-
give him some respect on that. I mean, it's got to be tough because for sure his older brother Peyton gets all this credit. Everyone talks about him. Everyone puts him in that conversation. But the truth is Eli put together a great career. He's got a couple of rings.
The only person in the NFL that is undefeated against the greatest of all time. Just saying.
And
The only one that has a winning record against the greatest of all time.
and
Just-
Aaron Rodgers' next team, the New York Giants.
No, he's going to the Minnesota Vikings. All right. Speaking of Aaron Rodgers and the crumble he had of this team, the New York Jets, the greatest of all time for the New York Jets, Revis Island comes to mind.
Yeah, he's a good player. I had Joe Namath.
That's not bad.
Joe Namath is a fascinating player to think about, okay? And the reason why is of course, we all, when you think about Joe Namath and you all talk about Joe Namath, what is it you think of?
The Super Bowl prediction.
Right, the Super Bowl
Guaranteed.
prediction. He guaranteed the win and he delivered, right? That's what we're talking about. Here's my problem with Joe Namath, okay? It's not him wanting to kiss Susie Colbert, okay? Do you remember that whole thing? He's all drunk and so there's that one,
kinda
okay?
creepy, yeah.
It was a little creepy, I'll give you that. Grandpa had a little too much cough syrup, right?
Yeah.
But Joe Namath, are you ready? Joe Namath's career completion percentage. He's a Hall of Fame quarterback. 50.1% career completion percentage.
And he had 173 touchdowns and 220 interceptions.
He threw more picks than touchdowns. You want one more piece for you on that?
Sure.
He has a career losing record. 62 wins, 63 losses.
Well, not all those were with the Jets, right? Was that or that? What's his record as a Jet? Do you know?
Those are all seasons with the Jets, 1 season with the Rams. He played somewhere in the range of 15 seasons. The vast majority of it. He played 4 games for the Rams. Everything else with the Jets.
Okay.
He has more losses than wins.
Can we also throw out 2 Fort Wayne offensive linemen that could be? One is not the greatest of all time. One could be considered the greatest offensive lineman of all time for the Jets. You're Jason Fabini. Can we give him a Fort Wayne shout out here?
Absolutely.
Since we are in Indiana here.
And you got to talk current.
And Joe Tippmann.
Big Joe.
Big Joe. He's there now. Could be another greatest offensive line. But, yeah. Who's your number one? Does Darrelle Revis beat anybody? Or
Curtis
not beat
Martin?
any? You would put him above Darrelle
Maybe.
Revis?
Curtis
Okay.
Martin had monster stats.
Yeah.
Who do you
And
think the
not a
Jets?
season.
Side note, sorry, kind of off topic here. Who's going to be the new Jets quarterback?
Tyrod Taylor.
I don't
Tagovailoa?
hate that one. If I'm
Trevor
the Jets, I
Lawrence?
don't make that move. I'll tell you, if I'm the Jets, what about Kirk Cousins? About going and getting him?
Given an opportunity for the team. I mean, the team has still weapons. You got Breece Hall, and you still have.
I could see Russell Wilson going to there or Las Vegas. Those are my 2
Justin
choices.
Fields could too.
Yeah. I think all those guys are
Yeah.
not terrible. Before we leave greatest for the Jets,
Sure.
Mark Gastineau,
Okay, that's a name that you haven't heard in a long time.
New York Sack Exchange.
Okay.
Impressive.
All right, and probably the number one team right now that's going to be tough to beat. Your Philadelphia Eagles.
Philadelphia.
Your number one best of all time.
It's Reggie White.
What about LaShawn McCoy or Donovan McNabb?
I mean, it's hard to. Reggie White was such a great player. It's hard to say.
Well, and you pointed out earlier, you can make a case for him on more than one team.
Right.
The greatest player in the history of the franchise for more than one team. That's unbelievable
that's
to think
true.
about, to make that case.
That's true.
I mean, if you want to throw other names out there, you can throw Cunningham out there. He was a great quarterback. For
And
them.
he was ahead of his time.
Yeah.
Is that running quarterback the dual threat?
there was a lot of Eagles players that, I mean, it's hard to just pinpoint one, obviously.
You
but,
could throw Brian Dawkins in there too. He was
Yeah.
probably the greatest safety in Eagles history.
And look at the team that they have now. Like, maybe 10 years from now, you never know.
You put Jalen Hurts
Jalen
on there,
Hurts could
maybe.
be
Yeah.
Saquon Barkley. I mean, that spin jump move that he had. Oh, my goodness.
That's something out of a video game, isn't it?
Yeah.
It has to be, but it was real life. Like, it happened.
Madden put it in the video game after that happened.
I'm pretty sure if, like,
Sure.
it was AI, they're hitting circle, square, and X all at the same time.
Sure.
So.
But just because, right, we're in the middle of this talk,
Yeah.
you know, the guys that never get any love in any of these sort of conversations is in some sort of interior lineman. I mean, Jason Kelsey.
Yep,
I mean,
That's
the
true.
anchor he was of that offensive line, you know?
that's true.
I mean, just the fact that we know who he is as regular fans.
Right.
How many other centers around the league can you name? It's tough. It's tough. And it's not I mean, granted, the Kelsey family became a little bit famous, but the reality of it is, I mean, he's a very, very good player.
Yeah.
You know, recently retired.
I mean, you got Jeff Saturday. You could talk about him as the center.
Sure.
And then the Pittsburgh Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger. Who was that for a while?
Uh,
He played in Buffalo a couple
Pouncey.
years. Pouncey, yeah.
And then you got Ryan Kelly from Indy.
Long ago, Jim Kelly's center was Kent Hull.
Okay. Yeah, so some of these centers do have big names, but you're right about that. Centers don't get a lot of love.
Right.
All right, this is going to be a tough one. There's going to be a lot of conversation probably about the greatest of all time for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, Roethlisberger would be mentioned, Antonio Brown would be mentioned, San Antonio Holmes, but I think the one true Pittsburgh Steeler, Jerome Bettis.
Yeah, I can't get there. No. I've got too many.
I got mine's Mean Joe Green.
Oh, I mean,
Yeah, that's another good name.
giant. Jack Lambert.
Yep.
Franco Harris.
Yep.
I'm biased with this Bettis because, I mean, when I was watching football, when I started watching football, I was a Colts fan because of my dad. But we would watch the Steelers, and we'd watch Jerome Bettis just plow people through in the bus, man. That nickname is just – it got me to love football.
Oh, he was a good player.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to take away
Oh,
from him.
I know he's probably not the greatest on there, but I have to give him
If
some
you want to
love
go
on my
90s
list.
Steelers, you can go Greg Lloyd.
Greg Lloyd, yeah. I mean, I think Troy Polamalu. I mean, there's one of those guys to think about.
Yep.
We'll have to look it up, okay? But at one point, I stumbled upon the Pittsburgh Steelers at one point, and this would have been before their big '70s run of winning Super Bowls, with Terry Bradshaw and the whole crew that we've been
Right.
naming here. They had a draft that their first, their second, their third, and their fourth round pick went into the Hall of Fame. 4 Hall of Famers picked in a row.
It's impressive.
Oh,
I mean,
it's unbelievable.
Coaching has to deal with it, though. I'm telling you, coaching does have to deal with it.
and the fact that they've only had 3 coaches since the 70s is insane.
But let me ask you, okay, so, I mean, obviously we're all impressed. Tomlinson and his coaching record of not having a losing record. But let me ask, okay, because here we are just chit-chatting. Is it really that impressive? Because the truth of the matter is yes, they made the playoffs. They were no contender last year. And the truth of the matter is how many years has it been since you said they were, in fact, a contender? I mean, aren't they just a team that's in the playoffs so they can get just walloped by a real contender?
Look at the AFC and how difficult it is to make the playoffs in the AFC.
Oh, there's no doubt about it.
When the last few years that the Steelers have made it with a winning record, and, you know, they're not contenders, they didn't have a top 15 quarterback.
I'm not arguing any of that, but in
Right.
some cases what happens is when you live in the middle of the pack that way, you don't get a good draft choice, and you're not truly a contender.
And
you're really neither
But
one.
that's not your question. Your question was, your question was about Mike Tomlin having a winning record. Is it really that good? Yes, for Mike Tomlin, yes, it is.
Okay, you're
Maybe-
impressed?
I mean, you got to be
For Mike Tomlin, yes.
You got
I
because
mean,
they got to play Baltimore twice. They got to play Cincinnati twice.
You got some powerhouse teams
And
in that
then
division.
you got Buffalo they play. And then even back when he first started, you had Peyton Manning's teams. You had Tom Brady's team.
Sure.
You have all
Sure.
those good teams.
Well, and then
You-
go
you-
before Tomlinson. I mean, let's face it, previous coaches had big runs of lots of wins in there as well.
Yes.
They're not a team that goes through. I mean, think about some of the franchises like Cleveland right now where they've had this drought, not for a year or two, but oh my God, they go a decade or something terrible. When's the last time Pittsburgh had some giant live in the basement time?
Probably
I
had
don't
to
think
be-
it's happened.
No. it
probably had to be
hasn't.
under the Bill Cowher era where they had maybe.
Even though they weren't contenders, like people doubted them as contenders, I can tell you some of those teams in the AFC first round would not want to play the Steelers.
Oh, I agree they can be a scary team. I mean, their 3-4
and they're-
defense is unbelievable.
They're physical. Like
They
you
are
play a
physical.
team like the Steelers first round, and you're beat up for the following week. Like you're like, gee, many Christmas. Yeah, I could beat the Steelers, but can I beat the Steelers then the Ravens?
I would
Can I
describe
beat
them as
the-
gritty.
Yeah, I mean, but they're tough. They're a solid, fundamental football team. You cannot make errors to beat the Steelers. I mean, you can make big plays and beat the Steelers, but the Steelers are going to make you beat the Steelers. Like the Steelers are going to make you lose to the Steelers.
So for a Steelers fan that's listening to this,
Yes,
are they a contender next year?
they're always going to be a contender if they make the playoffs.
They still
Okay.
need a quarterback.
I would say
Even without a quarterback, they were still.
Well,
a
they still
contender.
don't have a quarterback on their roster right now.
there were
And
14
that's
teams
fine.
in the playoffs last year. I would not say they were all contenders.
No.
It would have taken a miracle for some of those teams. If I just take Pittsburgh, okay, the truth is
Yes.
last year, the gauntlet they would have had to have run to beat Baltimore, Buffalo, Kansas City, that threesome, they're not capable of
Would you
those
have
3
said
wins.
the Commanders had a potential?
Sure, but that's you don't even run into them till you get to the Super Bowl potentially. But the
but
reality is
yeah,
in the
but-
AFC, you got to survive those 3.
You said there's 14 teams, but not, and only a handful had actual real contention.
Sure.
The Commanders weren't probably one of those handful teams. The Vikings probably weren't one of those handful teams.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
but when you have a team that's consistently there, that doesn't have the pressure of being in the playoffs,
Sure.
the contention once you make it is a lot higher than, oh, I'm almost going to be a wild card. No, once you're guaranteed that spot, I mean, in the toughest division in the AFC, don't get me wrong, everybody, if the Browns would have figured their crap out, all 4 of those teams would have been in the playoffs. Okay? To be able to be representing that team, it doesn't matter. You always will have you always have a shot when you have a coach that has experience.
I think if I'm going to argue this the other way now for a second, what makes it super impressive is the fact that they make the playoffs, and I would argue they might be the weakest quarterback team in the playoffs, or at least the weakest passing
You had the
game.
Broncos and you also had the Vikings.
Well, the Broncos, you got to give credit to Bo Nix. Nobody expected it, but he had a hell of a rookie season.
I mean, I would have rather had Bo Nix on my team than Russell Wilson.
And Bo Nix
Yeah.
has not peaked.
No.
No way. No way. He's
Russell
only going to
Wilson's
get
on the
better.
downside
Correct.
of his career.
But
Absolutely.
he's also with a coach.
But if I take a team like Pittsburgh right now, and you would put, I would say their quarterback play last year was, 25th in the league. If you would put the 15th best quarterback, so you're average at quarterback on that team, boy, you're getting close.
Yeah.
In other words, you
It's
don't
kinda-
have to have one of those superstars that we're talking about in Baltimore, Buffalo,
Right.
and Kansas City to potentially be a contender. The problem they have right now is boy, that defense has got to hold somebody under 20 points or they're in trouble because that offense isn't putting that many up.
As long as they keep T.J. Watt healthy and he does what he does, their defense is going to be all
I
right.
mean, it's no different than when the Giants beat the Patriots. The Giants were not contenders. They were the 6th seed. They were the last team to make it into the playoffs.
Yeah, they're a wild
Like
card.
the Bengals, if they would have made the 7th seed over the Broncos, I don't think the Bills would have been playing the Chiefs in the championship game.
Sure.
I really think that the Bengals would have beat the Bills pretty badly. And it's just one of those things. It's like Cincinnati went to Buffalo and smoked us. You know, they didn't even have to play Kansas City. They went to the Super Bowl that year. The Bengals went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Now
Okay.
he's not there yet, but T.J. Watt at some point making into this discussion of greatest Steeler ever.
Too many injuries for him to be considered the greatest ever.
But he's young enough that he could get there.
Correct.
TB determined.
Sure.
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah, he will be in the discussion maybe in 4 years when we all get back together. All right, 49ers. This is a long-time team,
Oh, this is a good one.
but I honestly don't think anybody's better than Jerry Rice on this team.
Boy, I tell you, if I'm going to argue for somebody, I mean, Jerry Rice, the greatest wide receiver ever played the game.
Yes.
But boy,
Hands down.
you can't not bring up Joe Montana in this talk.
No, you can't.
You can't not.
You're right.
Joe Montana, 4 rings, and I mean, come on, he's the one that kind of made that whole offense work.
I don't disagree with you. It's hard to when you have a really good wide receiver
Then
like
you
Jerry
go on
Rice.
the defensive side. One of the greatest safeties of all time is Ronnie Lott. He's severely underrated.
For sure.
Yeah.
And there's been a few great handoffs from one quarterback to another. But Montana and then have Young take the field was unbelievable.
Yep.
I mean, if I were going to go back-to-back quarterbacks for teams, maybe the Packers had one of those runs too.
Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. It's not. I don't know that I can discount Bledsoe to Brady. Now, Bledsoe I wouldn't put as an all-time great, but he wasn't a bad quarterback at all. And then you went to arguably the greatest. So when you talk about a run, and then you realize that, you go, man, now we're talking like a 20 or 30-year span of great quarterback play.
Yep.
And those 80s 49ers teams with Rice and Taylor and Roger Craig, and
Absolutely.
they were unstoppable.
Now,
Loaded.
Kind of food for thought here before we move on because we do have to. I'm almost out of battery here. If the 49ers played in the AFC, do you think they'd be a powerhouse team?
You mean today, now?
Yeah.
No,
I
not
don't.
now. They've got a problem in the sense that Brock Purdy played very well, but I question if he played very well because of the amount of talent around him. Is he ready to now carry the team? Because I don't think they have the talent they once had, and he's now got to carry the team, and can he do it?
And
No,
the
he
question
can't.
is,
He can't
who's
do it.
who's Purdy going to throw to? They traded Samuel. Ayuk has an ACL coming back from ACL injury. Their number one receiver is Ricky Pearsall, and then they have
the free agent list that they can
Juwan
bring in.
Jennings. The receiving, it's not. I mean, they can sign the Devontae Adams or something. I mean, what's he going to do? Throw the ball to
They
George
can-
Kittle all the
they can
time?
Sign Diggs. There's wide receivers they could bring in for Purdy that they have cap for. So, I mean, and this is a contending team in the NFC. All right, let's go to the Seattle Seahawks. This is my number one player, Marshawn Lynch. I love it. Beast mode. Should have had the Super Bowl win. They should have handed it off. That's why I put him where I did.
I had Russell Wilson or Sean Alexander.
I do not like Russell Wilson in that spot. Sean Alexander.
Well,
I'll
you got to
take.
talk about Seahawks.
I think Hasselback was better than Russell Wilson.
And you can throw Richard Sherman in there.
Richard Sherman would be a consideration, yes.
Steve Largent,
Steve Largent, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I actually don't know that name. I'm going to act like I do.
wide receiver.
Yeah, Seahawks
Before your time, Ben.
on a rebuild season last year still had contention to make the playoffs. I would consider them rebuilding again this year, but we'll see. We'll see how their
Yeah,
season
they just
goes.
released Tyler Lockett and talk about trading DK Metcalf. So.
Yeah, they're definitely on a rebuild season. Oh, this one will be fun. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, guys. Everybody's probably thinking Mike Evans, right?
No. I mean, he's a possibility, but that's not who I picked.
I think he's probably in the top, at least top 3. My name, you ready for this? Warren Sapp.
He was number 2 for me.
Oh, really? I thought I
Really?
was going to be like, oh, dude, I thought of this guy a long time ago. I didn't even research the guy. I was like, this name came to mind. Big 500-pound fast guy.
It's a good one. I like Allstott, honestly. I think that's an interesting one.
My number 1 was Derek Brooks.
It was Baker Mayfield, wasn't it?
No.
Yep, Derek Brooks.
Derek Brooks is a great linebacker for them.
They never had really a stud quarterback, though, did they?
Tom Brady.
At the end of his career, but he did win a Super Bowl.
Still
with
great.
Yep,
Still great.
You're right. All right, let's move on to the Tennessee Titans.
Wait a minute.
Oh,
we're giving up greatness there, too, with Tampa Bay, and we're talking quarterbacks. What about Jameis Winston? At the very least, if we're talking funniest, he might be.
Eating those
Most
W's.
entertaining, yeah, most entertaining for sure.
He might be.
Right.
I love him.
Sure.
I
Yes.
love him.
Tennessee/Houston.
Ooh.
Warren Moon is the only one that I really, when I did research,
Oh yeah, I had
hands down.
I had 3 names. I had Bruce Matthews, Warren Moon, and Derrick Henry.
Derrick Henry's definitely. You know who we missed for the Carolina Panthers was, that running back. Gosh,
Earl
Christian McCaffrey.
Campbell.
Well,
Earl Campbell.
Or Campbell. That's a name I didn't even think.
Maybe
of.
we got to think on that one
for
there.
the Titans.
Yeah.
For
I mean,
Oilers.
well, it was Houston. It was Oilers.
Oilers, yeah.
But, I mean, maybe greatest of all time. And, by the way, I know you're a big Bills fan over there. Thurman Thomas wore what number?
39, right?
34.
34.
Why do you wear 34? Because he
For Earl
grew up as a
Campbell.
big Earl Campbell fan.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I don't know why I thought 39. I knew it was 30-something. Jeez.
But yeah, Houston Oilers. They had some good teams. It's crazy that they never won a championship.
Yeah. What about Cortland Finnegan? Just kidding.
No.
Just because he fought Andre Johnson, thought he had a chance. That's why I put him.
I
on
mean,
that
you can.
list.
I mean, you can argue Steve McNair maybe.
Chris Johnson?
Chris Johnson, yeah.
Yeah. They had some Javon Curse.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Derrick Henry.
Yeah, Derrick Henry probably. Yeah. I know. Like I said, for Carolina, we missed Christian McCaffrey. I think he would probably be the greatest Panther of all time. FYI.
Yeah, probably.
All right, last team before we wrap it up. Your Washington Commanders.
The Washington Redskins.
Yeah, or the Redskins probably had the greatest player, but who do you got?
I have Darryl Green.
Yep, that's what I researched. I don't know much about him, but I can't argue for him. But he's on my list.
Fantastic corner.
Yeah.
I mean, unbelievable. Okay, if we're going to, just talk down a list, what about Art Monk?
Great receiver.
Art
Should have
Monk?
been in a Hall of Fame a lot sooner than he was.
For sure. He had a little log jam. There was a 3-way. There was Chris Carter, Andre Reed, and Art Monk were all vying, and none of them could get enough votes because everyone was arguing over which was worthy. The truth is they were all worthy.
Yes. Just like Reggie Wayne's worthy. But
Do you think
that's
Daniels
subject.
has the chance to be the greatest commander of all time?
Yes.
Possibly, yes.
I mean, for
4
sure
years
he had a
down the
great
road,
rookie season, but there's a longevity factor here that the truth of the matter is you can't even really have that talk. He's played 1 year. There are players that have put in full careers with a team like the Commanders or the Redskins before them, and it's a little disrespectful to those guys to play 10, 12, 15 seasons and let a guy in 1 year even into that talk.
I mean,
Right. I mean, you got Alex Smith too.
another guy considered for one of the greatest of all time. His career got cut short because he got murdered, but Sean Taylor.
Yeah.
for sure. John Riggins.
John Riggins.
John Riggins, great big physical back.
Who was the guy? Who was the tight end or not tight end? Defensive end that came out of Ohio State for them. They just got traded a couple years ago.
Chase Young.
Yeah, Chase Young. Thank you.
Yeah, but Chase Young, I mean, not an all-time great.
No.
He was a.
In
he
my
was
I mean, he's a good
generation,
pass rusher, but
In my generation or our generation, Ryan, there wasn't a lot of guys to talk about when it came to Washington. Not a lot of standing.
that the last decade or so, they've had some pretty bad teams.
Yeah.
Their
so-
heydays was in the late 80s and the 90s. When they
Yeah.
had Mark Rippon throwing bullets down there.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right. Anything else you guys want to talk about with the Washington Commanders, or anything that we missed on these teams that we talked about?
Well, when I think growing up of the Redskins and defense, it was Charles Mann and Manley. Dexter
Yep.
Manley was the pair of defensive ends there. Oh,
Okay.
Yep.
awesome.
No, those offensive linemen. back
The
in
Hogs.
The Hogs, yep.
The Hogs, yes.
All right.
Back in the day.
I'm at 5%, so we're gonna have to wrap it up here. Guys, thanks again for talking about this greatest of all times. It was a great conversation we had. Can't wait for season 3 to kick off with some really big, entertaining stuff. If anything else we want to talk about before the end, we could do so. But if not, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.